Is it just me? But aren't there way too many big budget films coming out? Like just recently, we got the highly anticipated sequel, Dhamal 4. Yay! Not only does this film exist, but it's produced on a budget of 200 crores. And if you've seen the trailer, you're probably wondering where that money went. Ajay Devgan's Fair and Lovely. Seeing this abomination of a motion pictures trailer got me reminiscing about my favorite era of films, the 2010s. You could go into the theater and get a different flavor of films week in and week out. There are big budget films like Rawan, Dabang, Dhoom 3, and Action Replay, which in my opinion is an underrated action comedy. These obviously existed, but alongside mid-budget and even low-budget films flourished. Films like Secret Superstar, Tere Bin Laden, Kahani, Bareli Ki Barfi, and many, many, many more found their audience and even proved to be profitable endeavors. But in the current era, films like these seem to be less frequent. Why have mid-budget and low-budget films become less prevalent in mainstream Hindi cinema lately? And what have we lost because of it? This is YHM Creatives, and this is my take on the disappearance of the mid-budget film. Before I continue, I want to make sure we're on the same page. I'm going to be exclusively talking about theatrically released films or releasing films. I'm not going to be discussing filmographies that were exclusively made for streaming platforms. Which leads me on to my first point, the emergence of online streaming in the Indian content market. See, streaming, as far as I can remember in the 2010s, was definitely the exception, not the norm. During this time, I would still be, viewing from DVDs. Go on the weekend with my dad to some dodgy, dingy little shop in the middle of nowhere and get some pirated DVDs with 4 on a disc at 240p quality. Then come home and, have an absolute ball. Obviously, there were still shows and films that existed for the Indian audience, but I feel that we were definitely an afterthought in terms of content on these platforms. But slowly, this did start to shift around the mid to late 2010s, when production companies started taking the Indian market seriously and began making shows and movies for our viewing, whether it was on YouTube, Netflix, Prime Video, or Tubi. Sorry. No one watched that shit, I'm just kidding. The habit of consumption shifted from physical media to online streaming. The ease of convenience and the portability it brought, where we were able to watch wherever you want, whenever you wanted, and whatever you wanted. And this was alongside a new batch of fresh content made for Indian audiences. I mean, this was the golden era for Indian streaming content, right? We had amazing content like Lust Stories, Inside Edge, Breathe, Sacred Games, we do not talk about Season 2, Mirzapur, we do not talk about Season 3, and even Delhi Crime. The quality of and variety we used to go to the theaters for or wait for on DVD, pirated or otherwise, were now available in the comfort of your own home, all for a small monthly fee. This was like a dream, but its promise eventually soured and its business model became more powerful than the theaters themselves. This was particularly evident in the theater to streaming deals, which were low as 4 weeks for certain films, often based on predictions on how they would do. See, the reason why lower budget films had a chance to, succeed initially was because they're able to milk the theater sales for as long as possible before they'll be available there for, streaming viewing. If word of mouth was good, they could actually succeed. But now films are contractually obligated to only last in theaters for a certain amount of time. And the audiences know this. So they're being conditioned to just wait. Because why waste money when you can wait for it to come to Netflix like a month later? This cycle has affected every film, regardless of its budget. But the lower budget films the most because not given a chance to breathe essentially in theaters. The cycle began to emerge in the 2010s, but was accelerated to the moon because of COVID. Where did this come from? This is even a mask. COVID. The pandemic basically gave all the power to the streaming platforms. With theaters closed, streaming platforms seized the opportunity to buy basically anything and everything that had lost its planned theatrical release. It was a win-win-win situation. The audience got to time pass, the producers got money, and the platforms gained subscribers. I mean, in 2020, Bhuj, the Pride of India, a film worse than was sold to Disney Plus Hotstar for over 100 crores. Far more than it would have earned in theaters, I'm sure. Lakshmi Bomb was sold for 125 crores. That's crazy. Because of the pandemic, many films that were slated for theatrical release were instead released digitally, diluting the number of films that appear on each platform. Because of this, budget films were just drowned to a point of obsolescence and irrelevance. Because why would you watch Chintu Ka Birthday, Bulbul, Gulabo Sitabo, or the other million options when you could see Coolie number 1 in the comfort of your home? Yes, Coolie number 1 is the correct option. Because they would watch anything online and co-watch everything online, that when theaters finally opened up, they had no reason to go back because they could just wait. So many films failed because of this, and these are often smaller budget productions. The only things that could justify pulling people back into theaters were that it needed to be an event, a moment, essentially that you needed to be included of. Every theatrical release had to be on the par with the Avengers Endgame. We obviously got some of these via KGF Chapter 2, Pathaan, and Jawan. These were event films. One was a sequel to a popular film KGF, and the other was SRK's comeback. I mean, who wouldn't go, right? The problem was that producers saw this and decided to put their smaller films straight to OTT at exorbitant prices because it just made sense. You got more money rather than pushing it into theaters where it may not even work. No one really went to theaters for small films because those films came to the audience. Speaking of producers, they also had a drastic change in their outlook on films. Streaming deals protected producers from enormous losses during the pandemic, and many got comfortable with that safety net. I think they got comfortable with the cycle because it was an additional source of revenue alongside their existing rights, and for some, even a dumping site for their content. For stuff that was either in production hell or just bad or both. Looking at you, Dharma. This division between theatrical and streaming content also changed audience expectations. The strategy emerged with the existence of the films I mentioned previously, which they were not necessarily wrong about, but they're wrong about the idea that no one wants to watch smaller films theatrically anymore. They started shifting these films often within the release window because, well, they're not even allowed to breathe or reap the benefits of just waiting. Sabar Ka Phal Meeta Hota Hai kind of went out of the window post-pandemic. And one of the best examples of this suppression was Lapata Ladies. If it had been given just a bit more time, in my opinion, in theaters, word of mouth could have started to build and actually made a far more successful film. Instead, they decided to cut their losses and just drop it on Netflix a month later. It did get its gratitude and many people loved it, including me, but I felt like it should have been given more time to be even more successful. The lack of support from producers is a major reason these types of films are disappearing. But when even these event films start to disappear, what do these producers turn to? I mean, no one would care about a film theatrically if it's not a big budget film, or if it's not, say it with me, a big sequel, requel, remake, or reboot. There's a sense of lethargy when it comes to reviving a dead franchise for the audience now. But these films do succeed largely because of nostalgia baiting and the cast associated with them. The biggest reason for this is because these films have pre-existing brand recognition, making them easier to market, finance, and expand. I mean, let's say from 2025 and beyond, okay? In terms of sequels, requels, remakes, and reboots, we got Raid 2, Houseful 5, Son of Sardar 2, Baghi 4, Jolly Aur Booby 3, De De Pyar De 2, Kesari 2, Sitare Zameen Par, Metro In Dino, Dhadak 2, Deva, Love Yapa, Boda 2, Mardani 3, Calendar Story 2, Dhurandhar 2, Welcome to the Jungle, Cocktail 2, and most recently, Dhamal 4. Shit. In just 1.5 years, we've gotten 20 films with an existing connection to a previous film or franchise. That is more films than months in that time period. And that exemplifies the problem smaller films face. I'm not saying that all these films do not need to exist, nor that none of them are good, but there's so many big films that come out constantly that audiences would naturally be interested in it because of the pre-existing connections to it, which make it harder for these original projects ever to even fly. So what do all these aspects do to these Hindi films and cinema as a whole? Well, they make the playground much smaller and bully these smaller films out, just to survive without ever seeing the light of theatrical day. If they aren't, well, there are currently 30,000 platforms ready to take the film off their hands, unless you're the lady killer. Sorry. We have exchanged original content for regurgitating what already existed. Every week in theaters has changed from an artistic experience to an exhibition of what franchise, character, or story they've now exploited. Theatrical Hindi cinema has lost much of its originality due to familiarity with franchises, characters, and stories. There's signs of improvement, but the risk-averse system remains apparent and exposed. Dhurandhar is a great start of more original films being successful, but one original success is not enough. We need films that continue to prove that unique stories can still be theatrically events and theatrically successful events. We may not return to the 2010s, but we can cover an environment where original films can thrive once again. If you enjoyed this video on something that I've been curious about for quite a while, honestly, please like, share, and subscribe. Maybe you can be and become one of my Andi Bandi Shandis. I plan to continue creating content for your entertainment and my experience. I appreciate you watching. Goodbye, and one day we shall meet at the screening of Dhamal 5, The Search for the Script.
But wait! There's more!
Also change audience expectations. This strategy emerged with the pre-existence of the films I mentioned previously, which are not. Oh my god, bruh.